I'll be joined by the panel in just a second, but first I want to tell you a little bit about the big tech bastardry that sees Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, putting a fact-check warning on Trump's post today, a post that did nothing other than pay tribute to victims of Pearl Harbor. Only after they were shamed by me on Twitter did they relent and remove the fact-check warning. Of course, it helped that Senator Ted Cruz and a few other influential types retweeted my post. But it shows that big tech will react to pressure. But if Conservatives stay off platforms like Twitter and Instagram, then the bias will only get worse. Now, I'll bring in the panel. I've got lead advisor from GT Communications, Liz Storer, joining me in Sydney, and former Liberal Party President Michael Kroger is in Melbourne. Now, neither of you are on Twitter. Why is that, Michael? And do you think more Conservatives should have a presence on the platform?
Well, I think they should. You're right. I'm not on it because I consider it to be just an absolute sewer. It's unregulated. It's just like drunks in a bar throwing mud at each other. And, Rita, it's full of fake accounts. And one of the things the Morrison government has to do, by the way, as governments around the Western world have to do, is to clean up Twitter. It is a sewer. They stopped allowing people to have fake bank accounts years ago. You can't publish letters in a newspaper under fake names. Twitter is a publisher. Facebook is a publisher. They should be bound by the same rules that newspapers and media organisations are bound by. And all of this harassment, the lies, the scuttlebutt, the denigration of people, the sewage that is modern-day Twitter has got to be regulated to stop all this, because in an era where people's mental health is being affected by all sorts of things, have a look at the damage that's done to people on Twitter by the unregulated abuse. It's disgusting, and it's got to come to an end, Rita, quite frankly.
But Liz, I get scared by suggestions of censorship because I think no matter how well-intentioned they are, they end up just making the platform more biased and more toxic.
Yes, and we see, Rita, especially with Facebook, especially with Twitter, said censorship is only directed at Conservatives. We saw this throughout the American election, the recent election, and we see this, it's always the Conservative commentators coming out saying, I've lost half my followers, my tweets are being taken down, can you guys still see me, can you guys still hear me? I actually do have a ghost Twitter account, so I don't say anything.
Ooh.
I just observe the mayhem and follow commentators, yourself included, as well as many on the left, because I find it a brilliant way to stay across a lot of information in a very quick way, just scrolling through those bite-sized bits and pieces. But I think one of the reasons why there's not so many Conservatives on it, and we are outnumbered on those mediums, is that Conservatives have lives. They're busy running their businesses, raising their families, doing the stuff of life. They're not as obsessed with the left. And as the left seem to be with us, and they're not remotely interested on getting onto that forum and you know, laying down the law and throwing insults at everyone who disagrees with them.
Well, yeah, having a job would interfere with the amount of time you can spend on social media. Now, today, Fox News' Tucker Carlson reported on a disturbing story involving a Chinese academic making some startling revelations which have been promptly deleted by Chinese state media. Carlson reported that on November 28, Dai Dongsheng, a professor at Renmin University in Beijing, appeared on a Chinese television program and said this about how China influences Wall Street, American politicians and international trade.
就是因为咱们上边有人，就是我们在美国的权势核心圈我们有我们的老朋友。
So, Liz, he went on to talk about the good professor there, about how well it was all going until Trump was elected in 2016. According to him, Wall Street can't fix Trump. They tried to fix him, but they couldn't. And he also spoke about some of the links with the Biden family. Now, we've for years have heard about this Russian collusion But it seems the real collusion is with China, and it's these quislings doing China's bidding in America.
100%, Rita. For many, many years, Russia has been China's scapegoat. It's all Russia, it's all Russians, they're the bad guys, they're the ones looking to usurp everything. But really, it's been China all along. This year alone, I've read transcripts and watched speeches from the highest ranked security officers in the US, and they have said, like never before, we are under attack by the CCP, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's stealing our information. It was only recently the case came to light of the Harvard, he was the chairman of the chemistry department at Harvard, one of the most well-known universities in the world, was selling secrets to the CCP and directing the top scientists their way and fetching a handsome $50,000 per month from the Chinese Communist Party as he did so. It is the people at the top, it is the elites that have sold Americans out to the Chinese. And we see this in our own country too. It's the people who are benefiting the most from their relationship with China, Twiggy Forrest and others, who are very, very willing to stay extremely cozy with this Chinese Communist Party, which we know is not in the best interest of our own nation.
Now, Michael, we've seen people be very reluctant to be critical of China for a number of reasons. One, they're hypersensitive and lash out if you criticise them. But Trump has been very bold. He has taken a stand. He hasn't been afraid to offend the Chinese communist regime. With the new Biden administration taking over next year, how is that going to impact Australia and our efforts to take a principled stand and not take a knee to China?
Yeah, well, I think the Biden administration will be weak in relation to China. You saw what Obama was like. He was pretty insipid as leader. No, what Trump did was, and he didn't lose because of his policies, Rita. He saw a lot of wrong in the world and tried to right it. As someone else once said, he tried to fix the one-way trade with China. He tried to fix ISIS, which he did. The three-peace agreements in the Middle East, moving the embassy in Jerusalem, Syria, NATO. And Trump tried to take on China and basically say you can't have cheap labour and free trade at the same time when America is basically importing huge amounts of goods from China and exporting a lot less to them. So he tried to take them on. And, of course, like any communist government, they don't like being taken on. And the Chinese government spies on its own citizens. It'll have spies by the bucket load in America and all Western countries. There'll be spies in the Chinese embassy in Canberra, but communist governments have been doing this for decades, Rita. The Russian government spied on its citizens through the KGB. The Eastern European governments, communist governments, all had spies. Ceausescu, all of them had spies. Even Idi Amin, the former president of Uganda, who wasn't a communist but a dictator, he had spies through the State Research Bureau and the Public Safety Unit, as he called it. So all these authoritarian regimes do not like being confronted. They spy on other countries, as we know, all day long. So how will it affect Australia? They'll make sort of overtures and peace with America over trade, and Biden will try to sort of people, I'm the great peacemaker, and that'll probably leave Australia a little bit out in the cold.
Oh, that's not good news. Now, I've got to ask you about this, Michael. The Victorian Liberal Party has been criticised for its weak response to Dan Andrews' government's so-called anti-conversion bill. Michael, I had a leftist feminist academic on last night who has voiced stronger opposition to this bill than we've heard from the coalition in Victoria. Why are they being so shy? And, what's the point of electing centre-right politicians if they never take a stand against anything?
Well, I think what Michael O'Brien has said is that he wants to have more time to look at the bill because it is complex.
There's not enough there to trouble him already. I mean, there's plenty that you can actually look at and find very troubling.
Of course, there's a lot there to trouble him, and you've seen some public comments by some church leaders who are highly regarded. They have the Catholic Church in Victoria, amongst others, worry about the infringing freedom of religion, etc. But on the other hand, some of the more extreme practices of gay conversion therapy, you don't want practiced. And all Michael O'Brien has said is, for goodness sake, given this is such a sensitive, important matter, can we just have more time to look at it? No, Daniel Andrews, of course. Daniel Andrews wants to.
That's a given. Nobody would be tolerate anybody trying to coerce someone who says I'm homosexual or lesbian to try to change their mind. That is not what this bill is really about. I think under the guise of that, they're trying to push through a bunch of stuff that is actually deeply troubling. And I just think it's worrying that we're just getting this meek response. We've got leftist feminists who are speaking out against this bill.
No, I understand that. As I said. I said sometimes you need time to look at a bill and consult people. I mean, this is not a natural, this is not a bill that's confronted politicians in Victoria before. And quite properly, Michael O'Brien has said, look, let's talk to church leaders, faith-based organisations, people in the gay community to try and find a way that, we find a bill acceptable to everybody that doesn't impinge the rights of the various petty interests. That's all Michael has asked, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. Of course, Andrews wants to ram this thing through, and it looks as if he's got the numbers in the upper house. So it could well be the case that, my friends in the state parliamentary party's views are not going to be terribly relevant if Andrews can get those numbers in the upper house.
It's not about the vote. Like we don't expect them by magic to have more numbers in Parliament and to actually defeat this thing. But Liz, they can actually get involved in the public debate and say why this bill needs to be changed or defeated, and what can be some of the consequences of passing it as it is.
I couldn't agree more, Rita. They're elected to be a voice in Parliament for people who believe, like yourself and they're really, really dropping the ball. As you just said a few seconds ago to Michael, is there not enough in this bill to already wage war in Parliament over this? We're talking about the threat of 10 years jail hanging over the head of parents, heading over the heads of pastors. This bill tells you what you can and can't say to your own children. There's a massive problem with that. It tells me what I can and can't pray for. There is a massive, massive problem with that. This thing is absolutely desecrating really basic human rights.
Absolutely, you are right. I wish I had more time to give you because you are absolutely hitting it out of the ballpark.
Just hitting my stride, Rita.
Thank you so much both for joining me.